What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so the judicial coup that we thought had come to a stop with these nationwide injunctions apparently hasn't, folks. Check this out. Analysis. Judges keep blocking Trump's policies despite Supreme Court injunctions curb. Oh yeah, so they're still going on. They're finding ways to work around. Like, there's so many, I don't want to call them loopholes in the law, because a lot of those quote-unquote loopholes were intentional, folks. They were definitely intentional. You could call it checks and balances, maybe. I don't know if I would call it that in this case, but maybe it is. I don't know. I really don't. I'm not a legal expert, y'all. I just read the news. President Donald Trump called the U.S. Supreme Court's June 27th decision limiting the ability of federal judges to use nationwide injunctions to block his policies a monumental victory, but his legal win may be less definitive than first appeared. The Supreme Court's decision curtailed the ability of judges to issue so-called universal injunctions that can stop the government from enforcing a policy against anyone, anywhere in the entire country. The Trump administration said it would move quickly to challenge such injunctions. However, the ruling by the court's 6-3 conservative majority contains exceptions, allowing federal judges to continue to issue sweeping rulings blocking key parts of the Republican president's agenda. In the short time since the ruling, lower court judges have already blocked Trump's asylum ban at the U.S.-Mexico border, prevented his administration from ending temporary deportation protections for Haitian migrants, and forced the government to restore health websites deemed to run afoul of Trump's effort to squash gender ideology. One of the biggest tests of the impact of the Supreme Court's ruling in Trump v. Casa will come on Thursday, when a federal judge in New Hampshire will consider whether to prevent Trump's executive order curtailing birthright citizenship from taking effect nationally on July 27th. Now, I'm sure this judge will try to prevent this, and then it's going to go to appeals, and then it's going to go, it's going to continue until the Supreme Court. And I really, really hope the Supreme Court sides with the Trump administration on this, because birthright citizenship, these people, Democrats and the criminal aliens that abuse the Constitution, right? We need to put in place some sort of legal blocks to stop people from abusing the Constitution, right? All those legal loopholes I was talking about, right? They're using the Constitution. This is a constitutional loophole, if you will, because they say, anybody born within the United States is a citizen. Well, the framers, this was intended on the children of slaves to become American citizens when we ended slavery. That's why it was writ. Just look at the writings pertaining to that amendment and why they wrote that amendment. That's all you got to do, folks. That's what that was meant for. It was never meant to be perverted in such a way that people can break into our country, illegally enter this country, have a child to anchor not only that child, but themselves to this country. That's bogus, y'all. They do this specifically for that reason. So it'll be much harder to deport these people. That's the only reason they do this. And it's just a perversion of our Constitution. That's all it is. Trump's executive order does not end birthright citizenship, regardless of what the corporate press have told you. That's not what it does. What it does do is it stops these people from doing what I just explained. Anybody that comes into the country illegally, remains in the country illegally, and has children, they will not become citizens. We're not going to incentivize illegal immigration, right? Because that's exactly what that is. That's an incentive for these people to come into the country illegally. We can't do that, folks. If these people, all they have to do is get some sort of work visa, and it's not that hard to become a permanent resident, a lawful permanent resident. That's not that hard to do. It's not like trying to become a citizen. Right? If you have a work visa and you're pregnant, and you come into the country and you have a child, that child will become a U.S. citizen if they enforce Donald Trump's executive order. That's just a fact. This only prevents criminal aliens and illegal migrants from abusing our Constitution. That's all it does. That executive order was at the heart of the Supreme Court's ruling, which did not address the legality of the policy, but held that the judges likely lacked the authority to issue universal injunctions, and ordered 3 judges to reconsider rulings blocking the policy nationwide. Issued on his first day back in office in January, the order directs federal agencies to refuse to recognize the citizenship of children born in the United States who do not have at least one parent who is an American citizen or lawful permanent resident. Class status. The plaintiffs in the New Hampshire birthright citizenship case are looking to seize upon one of the major exceptions to the Supreme Court's ruling. They argue it allows judges to continue to block Trump's policies on a nationwide basis in class action lawsuits, which it does. The lawsuit, which was filed by the American Civil Liberties Union and others hours after the Supreme Court ruled, seeks class action status on behalf of babies who would be subject to Trump's executive order and their parents. Now, that wording is specific right there. And I've kind of mentioned this fleetingly in a few articles in the past. This is the case, folks, that the ACLU is stepping into a snake pit with this one. Because on the one hand, they want to keep their birthright citizenship, but they don't realize the ramifications of doing so. If they rule in favor of the ACLU on this and force the United States to strike down, basically the Supreme Court to strike down Donald Trump's executive order as unconstitutional, then that will subsequently and unironically, to be honest with you, ban abortions. Because if you look at the wording of how they worded this, right, and this is the wording in the lawsuit as well, seeks class action status on behalf of babies who would be subject to Trump's executive order and their parents. Now, one of the litigants in this case happens to be a pregnant woman. So she doesn't have a baby yet. So if the Supreme Court rules and gives personhood to an unborn baby, yeah, a lot of cards are going to fall. We'll put it that way. The plaintiffs are asking U.S. District Judge Josephine LaPlante, who previously issued a more narrow injunction blocking Trump's order, to go further this time by allowing the plaintiffs to sue as a nationwide class and issuing an order blocking Trump's ban from being enforced against members of the class. At least one other judge has already followed this formula. On July 2nd, U.S. District Judge Randolph Moss in Washington determined that Trump's denial of asylum to migrants on the southern border exceeded the president's authority. He then certified a class that covered all individuals subject to the presidential proclamation on asylum and issued an injunction to protect the class, effectively a nationwide injunction. The administration appealed the ruling, which White House aide Stephen Miller called a judge's attempt to circumvent the Supreme Court's ruling by recognizing a protected global class entitled to admission into the United States. That's exactly what they did, folks, and he's totally right about that, because not everybody within that class are the same. They are different. And like we've said in the past, the courts recognizing a class of individuals, there's a very, very high status for this. It's a very, very high bar, in other words. So the fact that this judge came to that conclusion so quickly is fascinating. I think there's going to be a lot more class actions, said Lee Gerlert, an attorney for the ACLU, which brought the asylum case. Class actions must follow what is known as Rule 23, which requires the plaintiffs to meet several elements, including proving that the proposed class members suffered the same injury. Conservative Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito warned lower courts against certifying nationwide classes without scrupulous adherence to the rigors of Rule 23. The process to certify a class can often take months, a senior White House official told Reuters. The administration will be watching class certification decisions closely and plans to aggressively challenge them to prevent abuse of the process. And I agree with that. They need to, most certainly, on this. But, this all needs to be litigated. Donald Trump's birthright citizenship executive order needs to go to the Supreme Court. It's going to make it to the Supreme Court because these judges are going to deny it all the way up to the top just simply due to past precedent. Right? That's all they're doing, basically, is they're ruling based on past precedent. Now, once it makes it to the Supreme Court, though, the general counsel for the White House needs to make the good arguments here. And I think their arguments are going to be legitimate, that these people are abusing the system and we can't allow for that. Now, maybe they don't go exactly with Donald Trump's executive order, but Congress needs to propose an amendment to the 14th to clear all this up. I think with Congress doing its job on that, I think that would be a good thing. Of course, it would probably never pass, but it is what it is. It would force Democrats to once again get on the 20% side of an 80-20 issue, folks, which they are constantly doing, it seems like. But I hope all this plays out like it should. We don't know if it will or not, but I think that's all I got on this one. I want y'all to let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comment section. Y'all don't forget to smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here. Share this video anywhere and all over the place, all at the same time with everybody you know, even your neighbors, like the guy down the street, the homeless guy on the corner. Share it with him. Tell him, go check me out. Y'all do all that for me, and y'all try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.